There is a particular quality to the light in Copenhagen, especially in late summer. It's not the harsh, demanding sunlight of my Ohio childhood. It's a softer, more democratic light filtered through a thin veil of high clouds and bounced between the harbor's gentle water and the colorful facades of old buildings. It streams into our third-floor apartment in Stairbro, painting long, slanted rectangles on the pale Deinzen floorboards, and it asks for nothing in return. It was this light, more than anything, that told me we were home, and it was in this light that I stood, 7 months pregnant and full of a quiet, fierce joy in the center of an empty room. This room, my baby's room. For the past 2 years, it had been a glorified storage space, a place for my husband Liam's bicycle. A graveyard for flat-pack furniture we swore we'd assemble one day, a general monument to procrastination. But now it was a blank canvas, a vessel of pure potential. I stood with my hands on my swelling belly, the baby giving a gentle flutter from within, and I could already see it. Not just a room, but a world, a sanctuary, a nest dot. They call it hygge here, that untranslatable Danish concept of cozy contentment. But what I was feeling was something more primal. This was my nesting instinct, a biological imperative that had hijacked my graphic designer's brain and channeled all of my creative energy into a single, overwhelming focus. Project Nursery. It had started as a Pinterest board, as these things often do. Few saved images of Scandinavian minimalism, a clean-lined crib, a neutral color palette. But it quickly spiraled into a full-blown obsession. A meticulously planned design concept that was becoming the most personal project I had ever worked on. This wasn't for a client. This wasn't about a brand identity or a marketing campaign. This was for him. My son. I wanted to build him a space that felt like the Copenhagen light, calm, gentle, and full of quiet wonder. My design was rooted in the forest. Not a literal, cartoonish forest, but an impressionistic one. The color palette was built around a specific muted sage green I'd had custom mixed, a color I'd fallen in love with on the weathered copper roofs all over the city. This would be the backdrop for the room's centerpiece, a floored-ceiling mural I planned to paint myself. I had spent weeks sketching it in my notebook, a whimsical scene of a sleeping fox curled at the base of a silver birch tree, with a friendly bear peeking from behind a cluster of toadstools, all rendered in a soft, stylized Scandinavian folk art style. It was ambitious. It was maybe a little crazy for a woman in her 3rd trimester, but it felt important. The rest of the room was a curated collection of textures and natural materials. Liam had initially suggested a trip to IKEA, a proposal I vetoed with a look so withering it actually made him take a step back. No, this room would have a soul. The crib was a vintage 1960s Danish design, crafted from warm, honey-toned teak that I had found after weeks of scouring the weekend Loppemarkeder, the flea markets in Frederiksberg. I'd spent an entire Saturday lovingly restoring it with beeswax polish, humming to myself, my heart full. The changing table was a simple wooden dresser I was going to upcycle, fitted with custom leather pull handles I'd ordered from a local artisan. There would be a cozy reading nook with a sheepskin rug, shelves made from reclaimed wood, and textiles of soft wool and natural linen. Every single element was chosen, sourced, and dreamed of by me. This room was a piece of my heart. Liam, bless him, was wonderfully supportive, if a little bewildered by my intensity. As Haley's brother, he had a high tolerance for what he called family eccentricities. He saw my project as just that, a quirky, harmless obsession. He didn't understand that it was also a defense mechanism, a preemptive strike in a Cold War I had been quietly losing for years. My sister-in-law Haley is a copycat. That's not a cruel exaggeration. It is the most accurate clinical description of her. She operates like a cuckoo bird, laying her eggs in nests that others have painstakingly built. It had started with small things, little echoes of my life appearing in hers. When Liam and I first started dating, I wore a particular silver locket every day. 2 months later, Haley had the exact same one, claiming it was a family heirloom she'd just rediscovered. It was strange, but I dismissed it. Then came the Thanksgiving pie incident. I'd spent days perfecting a chai-spiced apple crumble recipe, a unique twist on a classic. It was a huge hit. The following year, Haley arrived at Thanksgiving dinner, beaming, and presented the family with a chai-spiced apple crumble, claiming she'd torn the recipe from a magazine years ago and had just gotten around to making it. Liam had just squeezed my arm and whispered, "Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery." I smiled tightly and said nothing. It escalated when we moved to Copenhagen for Liam's job. My life, suddenly European and exotic, became her personal shopping catalog. I posted a picture on Instagram of a unique mid-century ceramic vase I found in a little antique shop in the Latin Quarter. A month later, the exact same vase appeared on her mantelpiece in a photo she posted. A friend of mine asked her where she got it. "Oh, this." Haley had replied in the comments, "Was a lucky find at a little vintage market here in Cleveland." I have such an eye for these things. She never copied everything. That would be too obvious. She copied the things that were me. The unique, special things I found or created. The things that were expressions of my personality. She would absorb them and then regurgitate them as her own, burnishing her own identity. With my taste, my creativity, myself. It was a quiet, insidious form of theft, and it was making me insane. Every time I confronted Liam about it, he would sigh and give me the same placating speech. "She looks up to you. Odd. She's always been a little insecure." Just take it as a compliment. But it wasn't a compliment. It was erasure. And now, with the nursery, the stakes were higher than they had ever been. This wasn't about a pie recipe or a vintage vase. This was about the first home I was creating for my child. It felt sacred. And the thought of her seeing it, coveting it, and replicating it filled me with a hot, protective rage, which is why, in a move of spectacular naivety that I will regret for the rest of my life, I decided to get ahead of it. My logic was flawed, but born of a desperate optimism. Haley was also pregnant, just a month ahead of me. If I told her my plan, if I shared it with her openly and honestly, sister to sister, then surely she wouldn't copy it. Would be too blatant, too shameless. Sharing it would be like planting a flag. This design, this vision, would be publicly, undeniably mine. So last Tuesday, bursting with a creative high after finally finishing the detailed sketch for the mural, I did it. I poured myself a glass of sparkling water, set up my laptop on the kitchen table, and called her on a video chat. She answered on the second ring, her perfectly made-up face filling the screen. She was sitting in what was presumably her own empty nursery, a blank beige box that seemed to amplify her own lack of imagination. "Audrey, hey," she chirped, her voice a little too bright. "How's my favorite little Danish pastry? And how's my future nephew?" "We're good," I said, beaming. "Getting big? Listen, are you busy? Had something I was dying to show you. For you." "Never busy," she said, leaning closer to the camera, her eyes gleaming with a predatory curiosity. "Okay, so," I began, my words tumbling out in a rush of excitement. "I have basically finalized the entire concept for the nursery, and I am so excited I think I might actually explode. I wanted to show you before anyone else. Oh my gosh, I'd be honored," she said, clasping her hands together in performative delight. "I'm still struggling with mine. Just can't seem to land on a cohesive vision, you know?" "I know," I thought, but I pushed the uncharitable thought away. "Well, prepare to be inspired," I said, and I turned my laptop around to show her the large sketch of the mural taped to the wall. I walked her through the whole thing, the sleeping fox, the silver birches, the little hidden details. Her face on the screen was a mask of wide-eyed adoration. "Audrey, that is Breathtaking, she breathed. Did you design that yourself? I did, I said, my chest swelling with pride. You are just so talented. It's not fair, she sighed, dramatically. What about the rest of the room? Was my moment. The grand reveal. Funny you should ask, I said, turning the laptop back around. Let me share my screen. I pulled up my meticulously organized mood board. It was all there, the custom sage green paint swatch with the exact brand and color code listed beneath it. A picture of the vintage tick crib with a note about the loppy mark I'd found it at. The specific sheepskin rug I'd ordered. The leather pull handles for the dresser. The linen curtains. The mobile I was planning to hand make. From felted wool animals. I had even included links to the online stores for some of the items. I was handing her my entire creative soul on a digital platter. I walked her through every single element, my voice filled with passion. I explained why I chose the natural materials, how the color palette was inspired by the city, how I wanted it to be a space that could grow with him. She listened, intently, her eyes flicking back and forth across the screen, absorbing every detail. She asked questions, but they weren't the questions of a casual observer. They were the questions of a researcher gathering data. Wow, that wallpaper you're using for the accent wall is stunning. Is it hard to find? She asked, her voice innocent. It's a limited run from a small studio in the UK, I explained. I had to pre-order it months ago. So smart of you to plan ahead, she cooed. And that green paint is just the perfect shade. Not too dark, not too light. What's it called again? It's a custom mix, I said. But I have the code right here if you want to see it. I pointed to it on the screen with my cursor. If you think of everything, she said, shaking her head in fake wonder. I'm just so impressed, awed. It's the most beautiful nursery I have ever seen. It's so you, exactly, I thought. So please, don't make it you too. Thank you, Haley, I said, my heart soaring. She understood. She saw how personal it was. My plan had worked. I just hope I can pull it all together in time. Oh, you will, she said, her smile wide and dazzling. And it's going to be perfect. Our boys are going to be so lucky. We chatted for a few more minutes about our pregnancies, our due dates, the usual talk. When we hung up, I was buzzing. I leaned back in my chair, a huge, relieved smile. On my face, I had done it. I had shared my vision, planted my flag, and she had been nothing but supportive. The relief was immense. But as I sat there in the quiet of my kitchen, a tiny, cold worm of doubt began to wriggle in my gut. I thought of the look in her eyes as she stared at my mood board. It wasn't just admiration. It was something else, a focused, calculating intensity. The look of a shopper making a list. I pushed the feeling down. Don't be ridiculous, Audrey. I scolded myself. You're being paranoid. Liam is right. She just admires you. Wouldn't. Not this time. This was too important, too personal, too blatant. She wouldn't dare. The weeks that followed that fateful video call were some of the happiest of my pregnancy. Freed from the nagging anxiety about Haley, I dove headfirst into Project Nursery, and the room began to transform under my hands. My doubt, that cold little worm I'd felt in my gut, had been successfully squashed by a tidal wave of creative joy and third trimester hormones. Liam was right. I was being paranoid. Haley was just being Haley. And I was letting years of petty grievances cloud my judgment. The mural was the first and most important part of the transformation. Every morning, I'd wake up, make myself a cup of decaf coffee, and spend hours on a small stepladder, my belly pressing against the rungs, a tiny paintbrush in my hand. The whimsical forest began to emerge from the blank wall in strokes of soft, muted color. The silver birches grew tall and slender, their bark detailed with delicate black lines. The sleeping fox took shape, his fur a warm russet orange, his tail curled neatly over his nose. I painted every toadstool, every wildflower, every blade of grass with a loving, meditative focus. Liam would come home from work and stand in the doorway, shaking his head with a smile. "It's incredible odd," he'd say, his voice full of genuine awe. "You're building a masterpiece." And it felt like one. This room was becoming more than just a nursery. It was a testament to my love for this unborn child, a physical manifestation of all my hopes and dreams for him. Every element I added felt like a piece of a sacred puzzle. The vintage tick crib, now gleaming with polish, stood proudly against the far wall. The limited edition wallpaper from the UK studio arrived, a roll of thick, luxurious paper printed with a subtle pattern of constellations, and I carefully applied it to the accent wall behind the crib. It was perfect. The sage green paint, my custom-mixed Copenhagen copper, made the room feel serene and earthy. Everything was coming together, just as I had envisioned. My communication with Haley during this time was sporadic, which wasn't unusual given the time difference. We exchanged texts about pregnancy symptoms, heartburn, swollen ankles, the sudden violent cravings for pickles at midnight. But whenever I asked about her nursery, her replies became curiously vague, making great progress on the mural. I texted her one afternoon, sending a picture of the newly finished friendly bear. Her reply came hours later. "So cute. Mine is coming along to dot just that. No pictures, no details." When I asked what theme she'd decided on, she wrote back, "Oh, still figuring it out. Want it to be a surprise?" A little red flag went up, but I pushed it down. A surprise. That was nice. Maybe she was taking my inspiration and creating her own unique version. Maybe she was finally coming into her own creative identity. The thought made me genuinely happy. A week later, I called her. "So, Spill," I said playfully after we'd chatted for a bit, "I'm dying to know what you've been up to." "Did you find a crib?" "Oh, yeah, I did," she said, her voice a little strained. "It's, a crib." "Well, what style is it?" I pressed gently. "It's kind of vintage inspired, I guess," she said. "Listen, Odd, I've got to run. My doctor's appointment is in like 20 minutes. I'll talk to you later." And she hung up before I could say another word. That was when the cold worm of doubt began to stir from its slumber. I mentioned it to Liam that evening. "It's just weird," I said, stirring a pot of pasta sauce. "It's being so secretive. It's not like her." Liam, who was attempting to assemble the changing table dresser, grunted as he tried to fit a screw into a misaligned hole. "She probably just wants to surprise everyone," he said, not looking up. "You know what Mom's like? If Haley shows her one thing, she'll have an opinion on everything. It's probably just trying to manage the family feedback loop." Was a plausible explanation, a logical one. It's made perfect sense. And yet, it did nothing to soothe the rising tide of unease in my soul. I knew my sister-in-law, and I knew that her brand of surprise was often just a strategic delay until she could unveil her latest acquisition. The virtual nursery reveal was scheduled for a Saturday. It was Haley's idea, a way to show the finished room too. The whole family at once, her parents and Liam in Copenhagen, our grandparents in Florida, various aunts and cousins scattered across the Midwest. Liam got the notification for the family FaceTime call while we were eating breakfast. "Oh, awesome. Haley's starting the tour," he said, his face lighting up. "Let's see what my little niece's room looks like." He propped his phone up against the jar of marmalade, his expression one of pure, uncomplicated excitement. My stomach, however, dropped into my shoes. I felt a sudden, icy dread wash over me. "'Kay?" I said, my voice a weak imitation of casual interest. I picked up my toast, but my hands were trembling. Haley's beaming face appeared on the screen. A little pixelated, but undeniably triumphant. "Hi, everyone," she chirped. "Welcome to my little girl's room. I am so excited to finally show you what I've been working on." The assembled video chat heads of our family all made sounds of excitement. I saw my mother-in-law, Margaret clapping her hands together. Okay, so Haley began flipping her camera around. Here we go. Let me give you the grand tour. The first thing I saw was the color. A soft, serene sage green. A green that was so familiar it made my heart stop. It was my green. It was Copenhagen copper. There was no doubt. Oh, Haley, that color is divine. My mother-in-law gushed. Thanks, Mom, Haley said, her voice smooth as silk. I had to have it custom-mixed to get it just right. I just fell in love with this particular shade. My toast fell from my hand and landed butter side down on the floor. I didn't notice. I was frozen, my eyes glued to the small screen. Haley panned the camera across the room. And there on the far wall was the mural. My mural. It wasn't a hand-painted masterpiece. I could see that even through the phone's camera. It was a decal. A cheap printed vinyl replica of a whimsical forest scene. But it was a replica of my scene. There was the sleeping fox. There were the silver birches. There was the friendly bear, peeking from behind the toadstools. She had found an artist online and commissioned a knockoff. And this is the mural, Haley announced proudly. I designed it myself. I wanted something that felt magical and timeless. You know? You designed that, Aunt Carol squeaked from her little box on the screen. Haley, you're so talented. I never knew you could draw like that. A wave of nausea washed over me. Liam shot a quick, confused look at me. He could see the mural I was painstakingly painting every day, just down the hall. He opened his mouth to say something, but Haley was already moving on. And here, she said, panning to the accent wall, is my favorite part. I found this amazing, super rare wallpaper from this tiny little studio in Europe. It was a pain to get, but so worth it. It was the constellations. My constellations. This. Time, Liam's eyes widened. He looked from the phone to me, his brow furrowed in disbelief. He was finally seeing it, but the tour of horrors was not over. The crib was a real find, Haley continued, her voice dripping with faux modesty. I found it at a little vintage market here. I just love pieces that have a history. There it was. Not the real tick crib I had so lovingly restored, but a mass-produced, drop-shipped imitation, the kind you could find on dozens of websites. But it was the same design, the same shape. And she had stolen its story, too. She showed them the sheepskin rug, the dresser with the leather pull handles. She even held up a half-finished felted wool animal. And I'm hand-making the mobile myself just to add that personal touch, she said, winking at the camera. The family was ecstatic. The praise was a torrent. Original, creative, impeccable taste. Haley, you should be a designer. Every word was a knife in my heart. I sat there, mute, as the woman on the screen accepted accolades for my work. My passion, my soul, which she had pilfered and presented as her own. Audrey, isn't it wonderful? My mother-in-law asked, her smiling face turning to our little box on the screen. You two will have to compare notes. I couldn't speak. My throat had closed up. I felt the blood drain from my face. All I could do was stare at the screen at this woman who had so completely and utterly erased me. Liam saw my face. He saw the vacant, shattered look in my eyes. And in that instant, his denial, his carefully constructed belief in his sister's good intentions crumbled into dust. He reached out and ended the call without a word. The silence that filled our kitchen was heavier, more suffocating than any I had ever known. Liam just stared at me, his own face a mixture of shock and dawning fury. Odd, he whispered. She copied everything. And that was when the dam broke. A strangled sob escaped my lips, a sound of such raw, primal pain that it startled both of us. I buried my face in my hands and began to weep. I cried with a wrenching, full-bodied agony, the kind of tears that come from the deepest, most wounded part of a person. They were not tears of anger. They were tears of utter and complete devastation. The feeling wasn't just that my design had been stolen, it was that I had been stolen. My creativity, my taste, my story, my identity, all of it. Plundered and claimed by a thief who was now being celebrated as a genius. Liam was by my side in an instant, his arms around me, pulling me into his chest. "I'm so sorry," he kept saying over and over again, his voice thick with a rage I had never heard from him before. "I'm so sorry, Aude. I never should have. I'm so sorry." But I could barely hear him. I was lost in a gray hollow abyss of betrayal. After a long time, the sobs subsided, leaving me empty and limp in his arms. I pulled away and walked zombie-like down the hall to my nursery, my beautiful, half-finished sanctuary. I stood in the doorway and looked in. The light from the window fell on the sleeping fox I had painted with such love. It fell on the warm, honest wood of the vintage crib I had restored with my own two hands. It fell on the roll of authentic Constellation wallpaper, waiting to be hung. It was all still there, but it was ruined, tainted. Every beautiful thing I had created was now just a ghost, an echo of a cheap imitation in a beige room an ocean away. My masterpiece was now just the before picture. She had one. She had taken my dream and made it her reality. And I, the dreamer, had been left with nothing but the rubble. The aftermath of a betrayal is a strange, silent country. For the rest of that Saturday, our apartment felt like it had been hollowed out, the normal sounds of life replaced by a thick, ringing silence. Liam had tried to talk, to rage, to plan, but I had nothing left to give. The emotional dam had burst, and the flood had left behind an empty, barren landscape. I spent the afternoon in our bedroom with the curtains drawn, curled on. My side, my hands wrapped protectively around my belly as if I could shield my son from the ugliness of the world he was about to enter. Liam, to his credit, understood that my silence was not a weapon, but a wound. He brought me tea I didn't drink and food I didn't touch. I could hear him on the phone in the living room, his voice a low, furious rumble. He was talking to his mother. Couldn't make out the words, but I could hear the anger, the sharp, percussive sounds of his frustration as he tried to make her understand. I knew it was useless. Margaret, his mother, existed in a world where good intentions were a valid excuse for any and all bad behavior. In her eyes, Haley's theft would be reframed as a misguided tribute, a compliment that had simply been executed poorly. To admit the truth of Haley's malice would be to admit a crack in the perfect facade of her family. And that was something she would never do. Later, Liam came into the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. Room was dark, save for a sliver of late afternoon sun cutting through the drapes. "I called her," he said, his voice flat. He didn't need to specify who her was. I didn't respond. "I just kept my eyes fixed on the wall," she said. "She said she was just inspired by you," he continued. The word inspired dripping with a sarcasm so acidic it could have stripped paint. "She said she thought you'd be flattered." Then she started crying and said that I was bullying her and that pregnancy was making her emotional and irrational. I let out a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a sob, of course. The classic Haley pivot. In the space of a single phone call, she had transformed herself from the perpetrator into the victim. She was a master of emotional jujitsu, using her opponent's strength and momentum to flip the narrative entirely. "I'm going to make her fix this," Liam said, his voice hardening into a low growl. "I'll call Dad. I'll get the whole family on a call. I will make her apologize and tell everyone the truth." And that's when I finally spoke. "No," I said, my voice hoarse. I turned over to look at him, my eyes feeling swollen and raw. "Please, don't." He looked confused. "What? Odd. She can't get away with this. She already has," I whispered, and the truth of that statement settled into the room like a physical weight. "Liam, think about it. You make her apologize. She cries and says she's sorry. And what does that make me look like? The big, mean Sister Nella who made the poor, sensitive, pregnant girl cry. The one who couldn't take a Compliment. She's already showing her nursery to everyone. If I make a fuss now, I'm the one who looks petty and jealous. She's already won. The look on Liam's face was one of utter helplessness. He was a man of action, a man who believed in logic and clear resolutions. He was an engineer. He built bridges, but he had no tools to navigate this labyrinth of female passive aggression. He saw the checkmate, and he didn't know how to respond. He just sat there. His shoulders slumped and took my hand. His anger on my behalf was a comfort, but it couldn't fix the core of the problem. Haley had played the game better than I had because I hadn't even known I was playing. The next day was a Sunday of profound and aching emptiness. I avoided the nursery as if it were a radiation zone. Every time I walked past the closed door, I felt a fresh wave of nausea. My beautiful, joyful project, my masterpiece, was now a monument to my own stupidity. A testament to a betrayal I had walked into with my eyes wide open. I spent most of the day on the sofa, scrolling listlessly through my phone, a deep, lethargic misery settling into my bones. And then I saw it. A new post from my mother-in-law on Facebook. This was a picture of Haley, standing in the middle of my nursery, her hands on her belly, a serene, smug smile on her face. The caption read, "My incredibly creative daughter-in-law Haley, putting the finishing touches on the most beautiful nursery." So much talent and originality in this family. Feeling so blessed, I stared at the word originality. Margaret had typed that word. She had looked at a room she knew was a carbon copy of my own design, and she had typed the word originality. She wasn't just ignoring the truth. She was actively collaborating in the lie. She was protecting the family narrative, and I was the acceptable casualty. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud, dramatic break, but a quiet, cold, definitive fracture. The grief, the hurt, the devastation, it didn't disappear, but it crystallized. It hardened from a wet, messy sorrow into a sharp, clear, diamond-hard rage. They were all banking on me being the bigger person. On me being St. Clara. Oh, wrong story, but same idea. On me being good old Audrey, the one who always smoothed things over, the one who would swallow the injustice for the sake of keeping the peace. Haley had shown off her stolen room, and the family had applauded. And now they were all just waiting for me to accept my role as the silent, gracious loser. They were waiting for me to lie down and let them walk all over me. No, the word was a silent scream in my soul. Absolutely not. I would not be the bigger person. I would not go quietly into the night. Haley wanted to steal my joy. She wanted to pass off my creativity as her own. Fine. Let her have the dusty second-hand version. I would create something new, something she could never anticipate. Something so completely and utterly mine that it would make her stolen room look like the cheap, soulless knockoff it was. The lethargy vanished, replaced by a surge of adrenaline so powerful it made my hands shake. A plan began to form, a wild, audacious, beautiful scheme. My baby shower was in 4 weeks. 4 weeks. It was an impossible timeline. It was perfect. I stood up from the sofa. Liam was in the kitchen, stress cleaning the countertops. With a vengeance. I walked in and stood before him. My posture straighter than it had been in days. He looked up, surprised by the new look in my eyes. "Odd, are you okay?" "I'm better than okay," I said, my voice low and steady. "I have a plan." I laid it all out for him. The first design, the mural, the wallpaper, the crib, all of it was dead to me. We would not use a single element. We would start again from scratch. And we would do it in total absolute secrecy. No one in the family was to know. The baby shower, which was to be held in our apartment, would be the grand reveal. Liam stared at me, his eyes wide. "Audrey, that's insane," he breathed. "We only have 4 weeks. You're 7 months pregnant. We can't possibly pull off a whole new room in that time. Watch me," I said, and the ferocity in my own voice thrilled me. "She thinks she's won. She's sitting in her little showroom in Cleveland, smugly accepting praise for my work. She is expecting me to show up to my own baby shower, defeated with a half-finished, second-rate version of her room. She is expecting me to smile through the pain and pretend it's all okay. What she is not expecting is for me to have a completely new, completely different, and completely finished masterpiece hidden behind that door. And I, for one, cannot wait to see the look on her face. A slow smile spread across Liam's face. The helpless, frustrated husband was gone, replaced by a co-conspirator. He saw the fire in my eyes, and instead of trying to put it out, he was ready to add fuel to it. "Kate," he said, a new energy in his voice. "Okay, General, what's the new plan?" The first design was about the Earth. I said, my mind already racing, pulling new ideas from the ether. Calm, serene, forest Y. One. This one will be about the sky. The cosmos. Cosmic voyage, I called it. The color palette would be the opposite of the first. A deep, inky, indigo blue for the walls. The color of the sky at midnight. The mural wouldn't be a whimsical forest. It would be a vast, star-dusted galaxy. And the constellations wouldn't be on wallpaper. I would paint them myself, using the baby's own astrological chart as my guide, and I would gild them with real gold leaf. It would be a ceiling of stars, a universe of our own making. The tick crib would have to go into storage. There was no time to find another vintage piece. We would buy a simple, modern crib in a light, natural birchwood to contrast with the dark walls. I would paint the dresser we already had a deep, dramatic blue and replace the leather. Handles with small, solid brass knobs, like tiny planets. The mobile would be a solar system crafted from brass and polished stones. The sheepskin rug would be replaced with a round plush rug that looked like the moon. It was bold. It was dramatic, was 1,000 times more ambitious than the first design. And it was perfect, was a design born not of gentle nesting, but of righteous creative fury. "I love it," Liam said, his eyes shining. "It's brilliant, but odd. The logistics, the money. We'll be clever," I insisted. "We'll use what we can. We'll work every night. We will become a secret 2-person design build firm. Team. Miller, what do you say?" He looked at me, at the woman who had been a weeping heap on the bed just a few hours earlier. Now standing before him with blueprints for rebellion in her eyes. He broke into a wide grin. "I say Haley has no idea. What's coming?" he said. That night, for the first time in what felt like an eternity, we went into the nursery together. But we weren't there to mourn. We were there to plot. With a roll of painter's tape, we began to box up the old dream. We carefully took down my sketches for the fox and the bear. We rolled up the beautiful tainted constellation, wallpaper, and slid it back into its tube. Every item we packed away felt like shedding a skin of victimhood, when the room was once again a blank canvas. Liam stood in the middle of it, a paint roller in his hand. "Are you ready?" he asked. I looked at the walls that had for so long represented a soft, gentle dream. A dream that had been stolen and cheapened. Now they were about to become the backdrop for my quiet, brilliant revenge. "I'm ready," I said, picking up a can of primer. "Let's go to war." The first week of our secret war was fueled by pure, incandescent rage. We moved like commandos, executing a Black Ops mission under the cover of darkness. As soon as Liam came home from work, we'd eat a quick dinner, and then, with a shared, determined glance, we would retreat into the nursery and lock the door. The room, now stripped of its former identity, became our command center. We laid down dust sheets with military precision, taped the skirting boards, and began the arduous process of transforming the walls. The indigo paint was even darker and more dramatic than I had imagined. It went on the walls like a slice of the night sky, instantly swallowing the room's gentle, airy light and replacing it with a deep cosmic mystery. It was a bold, terrifying choice. For a moment, standing in the middle of a room that was rapidly becoming a dark blue box, I felt a flicker of panic. Had I made a huge mistake? It's dark, Liam said, stating the obvious, a look of profound uncertainty on his face as he surveyed our work. Trust the process, I said, trying to convince myself as much as him. It's the canvas. The stars are coming. Painting was hard work, a physical ordeal my heavily pregnant body was not prepared for. My back screamed in protest. My ankles swelled to twice their normal size. Every night I would collapse into bed, my muscles aching, my hands stained, blue, so tired I could barely speak. Liam was my rock. He did all the high parts I couldn't reach, the tedious cutting in around the window frames. He kept a constant supply of water and snacks by my side. And when I would stop, overwhelmed by a wave of exhaustion, and just stare at the immense unfinished task before us, he would put his hands on my shoulders, kiss my temple, and whisper, "We're doing this odd. She has no idea what's coming." While our days were a whirlwind of secret labor, we had to maintain a facade of normalcy to the outside world, specifically to our families an ocean away. This led to a series of tense, almost farcical encounters. My mother-in-law, Margaret, was the biggest threat to our operation. She called Liam almost every day, her voice a cheerful, oblivious drone of family updates. One evening we were in the thick of it. I was on my hands and knees, carefully applying a second coat to the skirting boards. And Liam was on the stepladder painting the ceiling. We were both splattered in indigo, looking like a pair of artisanal smurfs, when Liam's phone buzzed with an incoming video call. It was his mother, code red. He hissed, nearly dropping his roller. We scrambled. 'Twas a mad, silent dash to hide the evidence. Liam leaped off the ladder. I shoved the paint trays under a dust sheet. And we both dove out of the nursery, pulling the door shut behind us just as he answered the call, his breathing only slightly labored. "Mom, hey," said, forcing a casual smile. He angled the phone so it was just on his face, hiding his paint-splattered shirt. "Liam, I was just calling to chat," she chirped. "How's my favorite Audrey doing? Is she there?" Liam panned the phone towards me. I had managed to wipe most of the paint off my face, but a distinct blue smudge remained on my forehead, which I tried to hide with my hair. "Hi, Margaret," I said, my voice a chipper, false squeak. "Just relaxing. Reading a book." I held up a nearby throw pillow as if it were a novel. "Oh, that's nice, dear," she said. "You must be taking it easy, 'kay?" I was just talking to Haley, and she had the most wonderful idea. She's theming her whole baby shower around the Woodland Friends nursery she designed. Isn't that clever? She's having little fox-shaped cookies and everything. I felt a muscle in my jaw twitch. Liam saw it. "It's great, Mom," he said, his voice tight. "Listen, we were just about to eat dinner. Can I call you back tomorrow?" "Course. Dear, just wanted to check in," she said. "You know, Liam, everyone is still just raving about Haley's nursery. She has such a wonderful, original eye for these things." The call ended. We stood in the silent hallway, the smell of fresh paint clinging to us. I looked at Liam, and he looked at me. Then we both started to laugh. It was a wild, unhinged, exhausted kind of laughter. The sheer, unmitigated gall of it all was so absurd it was almost comical. Original, The phrase became our battle cry. Whenever we felt our energy flagging, one of us would just whisper, "Original I," and it would spur us on with a fresh wave of vengeful determination. The all is lost moment arrived, as it always does, in the middle of week 3. The physical exhaustion had settled deep into my bones, a constant, weary companion. The initial rush of adrenaline had faded, replaced by the grim reality of the immense tasks still ahead. The walls were painted, but the centerpiece, the star-gilded ceiling, was proving to be a nightmare. Applying gold leaf is a delicate, saddening art. It's thinner than paper. It tears if you breathe on it too hard, and it clings to everything with a static charge. My grand vision of a celestial masterpiece was turning into a blotchy, uneven mess. After 3 frustrating nights of trying and failing to get the constellations right, I finally broke down. I was sitting on the floor, surrounded by tiny, crinkled scraps of gold, my hands sticky with adhesive, tears of pure frustration streaming down my face. "I can't do it," I sobbed when Liam came in. "It looks awful. Looks like the ceiling has a terrible glittery skin disease." This was a stupid idea. I should have just let her win. Liam didn't say anything. He just sat on the floor next to me, pulled a sticky piece of gold leaf off my cheek, and put his arm around me. "Okay," he said softly after I'd cried myself out. "Okay, so the gold leaf is a bust. Plan B?" "There is no plan B," I mumbled into his shoulder. Plan B was to have a beautiful nursery that wasn't stolen by your kleptomaniac sister. "Let's look online," he said, pulling out his phone. "There has to be another way. Gold paint, gold markers." We spent the next hour researching, and we found it. A new type of metallic gold paint, thick and lustrous, that could be applied with a fine-tipped brush. A new hope ignited. Liam found a local art supply shop that carried it. "Go first thing in the morning before work," he promised. That small setback, that moment of despair, became a turning point. We were a team. When I faltered, he was there to find a solution. When he got frustrated assembling the new flat-packed birch crib, I was the one who could calmly decipher the cryptic, wordless instructions. We were partners in this secret creative rebellion, and it was forging our bond in a way I had never expected. We weren't just building a nursery. We were building a new foundation for our own little family. The smugness from Haley, meanwhile, continued unabated, a constant stream of poison seeping through the digital cracks of our lives. She posted constantly on social media a picture of her feet up in the reading nook of my nursery with the caption, "Enjoying the serene space I created. #HYGGE, #nesting." A close-up of the knockoff mural. Can't stop staring at these little details. So proud of how my vision came to life. Each post was a fresh stab, but it was also fuel. I saved screenshots of them in a folder on my phone labeled Motivation. Whenever I felt too tired to go on, whenever my back ached so much I wanted to cry, I would open that folder. I would look at her smug, smiling face posing amongst my stolen ideas, and my resolve would harden like steel. The final week was a frantic, caffeine-fueled blur. The new gold paint worked like a dream. We projected my star chart onto the ceiling, and I spent 2 nights on a scaffold Liam had built. My neck craned, painstakingly painting each star and tracing the delicate lines of the constellations. Cassiopeia, Orion, Ursa Minor, the Big Dipper pointing to the North Star, which I painted directly over the spot where the crib would be. The new crib arrived. The moon-shaped rug was delivered. I spent an entire day crafting. The solar system mobile from brass hoops and polished stones, my hands rediscovering a dexterity I thought I'd lost. Every element of Cosmic Voyage was coming together, and it was more beautiful than I had ever imagined. It was a room born of fire and frustration, and it had a power and a depth that the first, gentler design had never possessed. The night before the baby shower, we finally finished. We hung the last planet on the mobile, vacuumed the last of the dust, and peeled the last piece of painter's tape from the trim. We stood together in the doorway, utterly and completely exhausted, and looked at our creation. The room was magical. The deep indigo walls made the space feel infinite and intimate at the same time. The birch furniture provided a warm, natural contrast. The golden constellations on the ceiling shimmered and glowed in the soft light from the lamp. A private universe waiting for its first inhabitant. The moon rug lay soft and inviting on the floor. It was a room that told a story of resilience, a story of a quiet, brilliant rebellion, a story of us. "Wow," Liam whispered, his arm around my shoulders. "Just wow. Odd." I leaned my head against him, a profound sense of peace settling over me for the first time in a month. We had done it. We had pulled off the impossible. The stage was set. The secret was safe behind the closed door. She has no idea what's coming, I whispered, a slow, tired, triumphant smile spreading across my face. Tomorrow was the reveal. Tomorrow was Judgment Day. The day of the baby shower dawned bright and clear. The Copenhagen sky, a crisp, cloudless blue. Our apartment was filled with flowers, the scent of fresh baking, and a nervous electric energy that was almost visible in the air. Our closest friends from the city, a warm, eclectic group of fellow expats, and a few lovely Danes began to arrive first, filling the space with cheerful chatter and laughter. I moved through the room, a serene, smiling hostess in a simple blue dress that matched the secret room hidden down the hall. On the outside, I was the picture of calm. Inside, my heart was a hummingbird fluttering with a potent cocktail of anxiety and thrilling, vindictive anticipation. Liam was a rock. Key refilled glasses passed around the little salmon smerry brute I had arranged, and generally acted as a handsome, charming buffer between me and the world. Every so often, his eyes would find mine across the room, and he would give me a small, conspiratorial wink. It was our silent acknowledgement of the drama that was about to unfold. We were a team, and this was our opening night. My in-laws arrived precisely at 2 o'clock with Haley in tow. Margaret and John, Liam's parents, were pleasant beige people who valued politeness above all else. They hugged me, commented on the size of my belly, and handed me a tastefully wrapped and no doubt obscenely expensive gift. Haley hung back, a smug, knowing little smile playing on her lips. She looked radiant, it pained me to admit. Pregnancy agreed with her, especially a pregnancy in which she was the reigning family celebrity, the lauded creative genius. "Audrey, the apartment looks lovely," she said, her eyes sweeping the room with a look that was more inspection than compliment. "You have such a knack for making things cozy." The word hung in the air, a subtle dig. Cozy, quaint, small, nothing like the grand original vision of her own magnificent nursery. "Thank you, Haley," I said, my smile never wavering. "We like it." The party moved along at a pleasant pace. People ate, drank, and oot and ought at the tiny baby clothes and impossibly small shoes. Haley held court on the sofa, recounting for what I was sure was the 100th time the story of how she had been inspired to create her woodland-themed nursery. I could hear snippets of it from the kitchen. And the idea for the mural just came to me in a dream. It was the strangest thing. I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from screaming. Finally, it was time for gifts. I sat in a designated armchair, a mountain of beautifully wrapped presents at my feet. When it came time for Haley's gift, she presented it to me with a little flourish. It was a large, flat, rectangular box. "I saw this, and I just knew it was perfect," she said, her voice loud enough for everyone in the room to hear. "It's for the nursery. I know how much you love the little theme I came up with." I unwrapped it. It was a framed, mass-produced print of a cartoon fox, almost identical in style to the one in my original mural sketch. It was a power move, a final public branding of the woodland theme as her own. She was gifting me a cheap, soulless echo of my own stolen art. A gasp of admiration went through the assembled family members. "Oh, Haley, that's perfect," Margaret said. "It will match your nursery so well." The Freudian slip was so perfect, so priceless, I almost laughed out loud. No one else seemed to notice. I looked up from the print and met Haley's triumphant gaze. She thought she had me. She thought this was the final twist of the knife. I gave her the most serene, genuine smile I could muster. "Thank you, Haley," I said, my voice as smooth as cream. "It's very thoughtful." I set the gift aside. My calmness seemed to unnerve her more than any outburst would have. She had been expecting tears or a tantrum. She didn't know what to do with my piece. When the last gift was opened, A polite, expectant silence fell over the room. This was the moment. Liam stepped forward, a proud theatrical smile on his face. "Thank you all so much for coming and for being so generous," he said, his hand resting on my shoulder. "Now for the main event. Audrey has been working so hard on a very special project, and we're finally ready to show you all the nursery." An excited murmur went through the crowd. I saw Haley exchange a smug, knowing look with her mother. Her expression was one of bored, condescending pity. She was ready to see my sad, failed attempt to live up to her glory. She was ready for her victory lap. I stood up and led the procession down the short hallway to the closed nursery door. The door itself felt like a vault guarding a treasure of immense value. I put my hand on the cool brass knob. The entire party crowded into the hallway behind me, a sea of expectant faces. I took a deep breath, met Liam's shining eyes over their heads. I turned the knob. I pushed the door open. The gasp was audible and collective. It was a sharp, involuntary intake of breath from 20 people at once. It was followed by a silence so complete, so profound, that I could hear the faint ticking of the clock in the living room. No one moved. They just stared. I had designed the reveal with this moment in mind. The hallway was bright with afternoon sun, but I had drawn a thin, gauzy curtain over the nursery window. The room was cast in a soft, ethereal twilight. The first thing you saw was not the walls, but the ceiling, the golden constellations painted on their deep indigo canvas. Caught the light from the hallway and shimmered, a breathtaking private galaxy. It took a moment for the eyes to adjust, to take in the deep, dramatic color of the walls, the clean, light wood of the modern crib, the plush, round moon rug on the floor, and the brass solar system mobile, turning ever so slightly in a stray current of air. It was a room of quiet, cosmic magic. It was a work of art, and it was a complete and utter shock. "Oh my God," one of my friends whispered, finally breaking the silence. And then the spell was broken, and the praise came in a joyous, overwhelming flood. "Audrey, I've no words. It's breathtaking. I've never seen anything like this. It's a masterpiece. It's like something out of a fairy tale." People slowly filtered into the room, their faces filled with genuine awe. Touching the walls, admiring the mobile, marveling at the golden ceiling. They were utterly captivated. Through it all. I didn't move from the doorway. I didn't need to. I was watching the only reaction that mattered. I was watching Haley. She was standing just behind her parents, frozen in place. Her smug, self-satisfied smile had not just faded. It had been wiped clean from her face, leaving behind a slack-jawed, vacant mask of disbelief. Her eyes darted around the room, taking in every detail, and I could see the frantic calculations happening behind them. The deep blue, the gold, the planets, the stars. This wasn't a sad, half-finished copy of her woodland theme. This wasn't a surrender. This was a declaration of war, and she hadn't even known she was on the battlefield. Her face, a canvas of shifting emotions, was a masterpiece in its own right. First, the shock. Then, a flicker of dawning, horrified comprehension. Then, a flash of pure, undiluted fury as she understood, in that single, crushing instant, what I had done. She knew that I knew, and she knew that I had not. Only refused to be her victim, but I had outcreated her, outmaneuvered her, and, in front of the entire family, rendered her celebrated original design a stale, pathetic fraud. The praise that had been lavished on her for weeks was now exposed as a hollow joke. I had built a universe, while she had merely Xeroxed a forest. Her mother, Margaret, ever the diplomat, finally seemed to grasp the magnitude of the situation. She turned to Haley, a flustered, panicked look on her face. "Oh, isn't that different?" she said, her voice a tight, strained whisper. Haley didn't respond. Her face had settled into a pale, tight-lipped mask of humiliation. Her eyes, when they finally met mine, were glittering with a mixture of hatred and defeat. I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk. I simply held her gaze and gave her a small, serene, and utterly unshakable smile. And in that moment, she knew, and I knew, that I had won. The victory was not in the shouting. It was in the silence, was in the art. The rest of the party was a blur. Haley and her parents left early, pleading a headache. The goodbyes were stiff and brief. A new boundary had been drawn, not with words, but with indigo paint and gilded stars. The war was over. That night, after the last guest had gone and the apartment was finally quiet, Liam and I stood together in the doorway of the nursery. The gifts were piled in a corner. The apartment was a mess, but this room, our room, was a pocket of perfect peace. I have never been more proud of you in my entire life, he said softly, wrapping his arms around me from behind and resting his chin on my shoulder. We did it, I whispered, leaning back against him. Later, after Liam had gone to bed, I came back to the nursery alone. I sat down in the comfortable reading chair, the one piece of furniture that had survived from the original plan. Kicked off my shoes and rested my swollen feet on the soft, moon-like rug. The room was silent, save for the gentle hum of the city outside. I looked up at the golden constellations glittering above me. The rage was gone. The hurt was gone. The desperate need for revenge had vanished, replaced by something far more profound. A deep, unshakable sense of peace. This room was the result of a betrayal, yes, but it was no longer defined by it. It had been forged in fire, and it had come out stronger, more beautiful, and more me than the first design had ever been. Haley hadn't just stolen a design. She had inadvertently given me a gift. She had forced me to fight for myself, for my creativity, for my joy. She had pushed me out of my comfortable, conflict-avoidant shell and shown me a strength I never knew I possessed. I placed my hands on my belly, where my son was kicking gently, as if in applause. He would be born into this room. He would grow up under these stars, okay? And he would know from his very first breath that he was in a space that was not only beautiful, but that was fought for, and that was unequivocally his. It was a sanctuary. And I, its creator and its guardian, was finally, truly at peace.